It was Saturday, and I was not eager to endure another day of humiliation. My wife, Kathy, and I spent the afternoon in the common area of the condo with 3 other couples, drinking beer and eating food from the grill. The beer was pretty much the same, but the food selection varied depending on who was coming that week. We held these gatherings for about 4 months. It started out fine, but lately, I started noticing that the wives seemed to have more fun than the guys, and it was different. The other 3 husbands didn't seem to notice, and at first I thought I might be being paranoid until I looked into it a little deeper. Most conversations were between men or women. The men talked about sports, work, and politics. The women talked about other things. As the day wore on, all the conversations seemed to blur together and usually ended with all 8 of us chatting. It was around this time that subtle cuckolding began to appear. It never showed on your face, but it was always somehow sly, and it was usually followed by giggles from the girls' side of the table. I've started to pay attention to this in the last few weeks. We all moved into an apartment around the same time. Gary was a welder and was married to Amy, who was a fitness enthusiast. Amy was a petite brunette with a gorgeous body. She loved to play sports and keep fit. Gary was big, burly, and a bit slow-witted. They didn't seem right for each other at all, but I assumed it was love. Raymond was a police officer who was permanently on duty due to injury. He didn't mind being away from the streets. He was married to Julie, who was the only one of the girls who worked. Julie was fair-haired and cheerful. She worked in the claims department of a local insurance company. Cecil worked as a mail sorter at the local post office. He was a quiet, laid-back guy, and his wife was the same. Marcy had shoulder-length brown hair and a reserved appearance. The only time she showed any personality was when the girls giggled. She wasn't ugly, and she had a beautiful body. She was just kind of invisible. My name is John. I am a lawyer, but I work only on a voluntary basis. The office I work in is funded by several grants, so although we don't charge money for the work, I make a decent salary. I met my wife Katie in college. She is cute and perky with short blonde hair. Just a few weeks ago, I thought everything was perfect between us. Now I know that this is not true. As scheduled, the girls began their little game. They began to tease Raymond about Julie spending so much time in the supermarket. They made some inappropriate references to sex with the salesman and ended up telling him to be careful that she didn't get too friendly with the butcher. Everyone had a good laugh at Raymond's expense, including his wife. Cecil was next on the cutting board. The girls found it very funny to talk about how Marcy worked overtime with her handsome Italian boss, and even mentioned long lunch breaks a few times. Cecil didn't seem to think it was funny, but Gary and Raymond had a good laugh about it. Marcy just smiled and rolled her eyes shyly. Gary was attacked more than the other 2. The 3 girls talked non-stop about how well Amy worked out every day at the gym and how jealous they were of her. Gary tried to laugh it off, but it was clear that he was in a little pain. Amy smiled and stroked his balding head, as if letting him know that everything was okay. I knew I was next, but I also knew I wasn't going to stick around for the sake of it. 2 weeks earlier, I decided to check everything again. Sometimes Gary and I would give me a ride to work, so that allowed me to try some things. After the guys left for work, the girls gathered at Amy's to have morning coffee and chat. Marcy wasn't there because she had to work. When I left for work, I went to meet Gary at his house. Installing a voice-activated voice recorder in the kitchen was easy. I was going to put it on the refrigerator, but I was afraid that the vibration would be recorded. After work, Gary and I went to his house and picked up the recorder. The first 2 days I listened and heard nothing but idle chatter, but I was determined, so I kept at it. The 3rd day opened my eyes. The first 30 minutes of the recording were standard conversations about everyday, boring things. I wanted to fast forward, but I was afraid I missed something. Amy finally broke the ice. "We need to get this over with quickly, girls. I can't keep Tom waiting too long." "Oh God, I'm jealous," Katie intervened. "I've never played with anyone like I did with Pony Boy." "It's not that big, just bigger than usual or anything else I saw." There was a lot of giggling around the table. Then I could make out Julie saying, "How big is it, Amy? Is it 20, 22, 25 or more?" "I never measured it, idiots, but I would guess about 25 centimeters." Katie had to ask next. Doesn't it hurt? Only when he had dirty sex with me. I can only do this to him once a week. This caused a good laugh at the table. Today is also Marcy's day at the motel. God, I feel abandoned. I don't think I can wait until tomorrow to go to the mall. Katie pretended to sob lightly. I can't believe Marcy got his name tattooed on her butt, Julie said. You have to look closely to see his name. It seems to be in harmony with the pattern on the butterfly's wing. How did she explain this to Cecil? She said she did it for him, Katie replied. This was followed by another round of laughter. So, Julie and I are going to be celibate today, but we'll catch up tomorrow. Where are you going to go, Julie? Jerry has a day off tomorrow, so we'll just go to his house. It's nice that he lives alone. Go, girls. Get out of here. I need to go down to the gym before Tom gets exhausted. It was clear that Amy was alarmed. The recording ended there, but after listening to it a few times, I was able to piece a lot together. The next day, I felt sick. Luckily, I didn't have any court appearances. That night, I checked the computer and didn't find any secret emails or anything. I also checked the incoming and outgoing calls from her mobile phone, and there was nothing there. I checked my phone records for the last 2 months and didn't see anything to indicate she was cheating. I went to work as usual, but stopped near my house to wait for her. The wait was long, but shortly before noon, she left the house and headed to the mall. I had a pretty good idea of where she was going, so I didn't have to follow her too closely. She parked near the main entrance to the shopping center. As she walked towards the entrance, she rummaged through her purse. She took out a small red flip phone and made a call. Her usual cell phone is silver, and this is the first time I've seen red. She stopped at the entrance, turned around, and looked around the parking lot. Apparently not too well because she didn't see me. Walking down the long entrance corridor, she turned right into the main part of the shopping center. She stopped and looked around several times, but still did not see me. I watched as she walked in and headed toward the service area in the back. She stopped one last time, looked around, and headed towards the receiving and loading area. By the time I got there, I only caught a glimpse of a blue Ford Explorer driving away. She was in it. I was pretty sure she would be gone for a while, so I stopped by the food court and grabbed a bite to eat. After purchasing a couple of magazines, I drove to the back of the center and parked so I could watch the people coming and going, only when he had dirty sex with me. I can only do this to him once a week. This caused a good laugh at the table. Today is also Marcy's day at the motel. God, I feel abandoned. I don't think I can wait until tomorrow to go to the mall. Katie pretended to sob lightly. I can't believe Marcy got his name tattooed on her butt, Julie said. You have to look closely to see his name. It seems to be in harmony with the pattern on the butterfly's wing. How did she explain this to Cecil? She said she did it for him, Katie replied. This was followed by another round of laughter. So, Julie and I are going to be celibate today, but we'll catch up tomorrow. Where are you going to go, Julie? Jerry has a day off tomorrow, so we'll just go to his house. It's nice that he lives alone. Go, girls, get out of here. I need to go down to the gym before Tom gets exhausted. It was clear that Amy was alarmed. The recording ended there, but after listening to it a few times, I was able to piece a lot together. The next day, I felt sick. Luckily, I didn't have any court appearances. That night, I checked the computer and didn't find any secret emails or anything. I also checked the incoming and outgoing calls from her mobile phone, and there was nothing there. I checked my phone records for the last 2 months and didn't see anything to indicate she was cheating. I went to work as usual, but stopped near my house to wait for her. The wait was long, but shortly before noon, she left the house and headed to the mall. I had a pretty good idea of where she was going, so I didn't have to follow her too closely. She parked near the main entrance to the shopping center. As she walked towards the entrance, she rummaged through her purse. She took out a small red flip phone and made a call. Her usual cell phone is silver, and this is the first time I've seen red. She stopped at the entrance, turned around, and looked around the parking lot. Apparently not too well, because she didn't see me. Walking down the long entrance corridor, she turned right into the main part of the shopping center. She stopped and looked around several times, but still did not see me. I watched as she walked in and headed toward the service area in the back. She stopped one last time, looked around and headed towards the receiving and loading area. By the time I got there, I only caught a glimpse of a blue Ford Explorer driving away. She was in it. I was pretty sure she would be gone for a while, so I stopped by the food court and grabbed a bite to eat. After purchasing a couple of magazines, I drove to the back of the center and parked so I could watch the people coming and going from the reception area. My car looked pretty ordinary, so I didn't have to worry about being noticed. About 2 hours later, a blue SUV pulled into oncoming traffic and Katie got out. She made a few comments, smiled, and walked into the mall. I had no problems getting the car number. I went to work and checked the license plate. The blue Explorer belonged to Bobby Gerhard, the salesman who sold us the Focus 6 months ago. I came home at the usual time, and Katie cooked dinner as usual. That evening she was feeling a little nervous, but I stated that I had a Hidaki. The next day I had to go to work and catch up on some stuff. I didn't think she'd be seeing Bobby 2 days in a row. However, the next day I left work early for lunch and drove to the parking lot behind the shopping center. Right on schedule, Bobby pulled up and my wife jumped into the SUV. I followed them to the Rainbow Motel. He didn't need to go into the office because he already had the key. They both walked into room 114 as if they had done this hundreds of times before. Returning to work, I found myself crying. That evening, as Katie was getting ready for bed, I found a red cell phone in the lining of her purse. It was a prepaid cell phone with one preset number marked BG. It's time to get back to reality. I was the only one of the remaining men who was not humiliated. Of course, I was the only one who had any idea that the humiliation actually happened in reality. I could tell Amy was getting ready to say something smart, and I raised my hand. Sorry, girls, but it's time for John to go home. I'm sure you can humiliate these half-drunk idiots for a while longer, but I don't intend to participate today. I wish you all good night. I'll see you when you get home, Katie. There was a small uprising among the troops. I don't know who spoke more, the girls or the guys. As a rule, they were looking for some kind of explanation, which I did not give. What do you mean, John? We are not belittling anyone here. What kind of nonsense are you making up? It's all a lot of fun. My wife told me this with a straight face. That's not true, honey. You and the other girls made fun of us every week. Every time we get together, it gets angrier and angrier. It's bad enough that you all cheat on your husbands, but it's disgusting when you decide to rub it in our faces. At this point, the group fell silent. The guys looked stunned, and the girls seemed somewhere between annoyed and worried. John, we're all having a good time. That's why we get together. If you have something on your mind, just say it. It sounds like you're angry at the world and taking it out on us. Katie tried to calm the crowd a little, but I felt that she was aggravating the humiliation. I can't speak for the other guys here, but if you want me to dump all our dirty laundry on the table, I will, but you have to be prepared for the consequences. What consequences and what dirty laundry are you talking about? You're full of crap, John Terrell. Come on, tell everyone about your fantasies so we can have a good laugh. Katie had a confident smirk on her face as she issued the challenge. Gary, Raymond, and Cecil, I apologize in advance for anything I say that causes discord in your families. I won't talk about any of your problems, but I will tell you about mine. You can face your wives when you are ready, but I assure you that they are just as guilty as Katie. The whole table sat in quiet anticipation. The guys looked amazed, and the girls seemed a little nervous, but still arrogant. Katie has been dating her boyfriend for several months. She leaves the house and goes to the mall, where she calls him from her secret red cell phone, which she keeps hidden in the lining of her purse. The only preloaded number in the phone is BG. It just so happens to be Bobby Gerhard, the car salesman who sold us the Focus about 6 months ago. She walks through the mall and Bobby picks her up from behind in his big blue SUV. They usually spend a couple of hours at the Rainbow Motel before Bobby drops her off at the mall to go home. Katie enjoys amazing sex with Bobby several days a week and laughs at my face in front of everyone on the weekends. She thinks it's fun. Do you need any more details, dear? Maybe next week I'll have some photos or videos. Everyone remained deathly silent until suddenly Katie leaned forward and vomited onto the table. The combination of hot dogs, potato chips, and stomach beer didn't look nearly as appetizing. She turned around in her seat and continued to vomit until nothing else came out. Amy and Marcy finally picked her up and took her back to Cecil and Marcy's apartment. That was disgusting, John. It was a vile and hateful act. Julie was packing some things before joining the girls. Yes, but was it true? Go to hell, you son of a bitch. Julie closed the door behind her and left me there with a silent bunch of stunned idiots. I grabbed a rag that was nearby and began to wipe everything around while the guys collected their things. I didn't expect such a reaction from her. I thought she would be defensive or angry, but never vomit. John, sit the hell down and talk to us. I could tell Gary was a little pissed. We moved to an empty table and Cecil brought beer from the refrigerator. What exactly do you want to know? I can tell you very little about what your wives do. I spent all my time checking on Katie. If you want to know anything about them, you'll have to do it yourself, like I did. Raymond gave everyone a new mug of beer. Can you at least give us a hint? Maybe you can tell us what made you believe they were cheating in the first place? I can give each of you something, but you cannot share this information with your wife. You should get the evidence you need by finding it somewhere else. I don't have all the answers, but if you're trying to get your wives to admit to cheating, you're asking for trouble. Get the facts first, like I did, before you do anything. Gary looked dejected. I don't know if I can do this, John. I'll try, but I don't understand how. Cecil was beginning to worry. Come on, John. Give us something. Girls tease each of you in different ways. They tell you straight to your face how they are cheating. Marcy is having an affair with a guy she works with. I don't know who, but she got a tattoo on her butt in honor of him. His name is in Butterfly Wing. I think he's Italian. Julie is dating a guy named Jerry, who works at Winn-Dixie. They go to his house on his days off. That's all I know about them. Gary, I hate to say it, but Amy does this several times a week with a trainer at the fitness club. She calls him Tom because he has a really big man tool. That's all I know, guys. They didn't look happy. Raymond looked angry. Cecil looked sad, and Gary looked like he was about to fall apart. I can't do this, John. Gary sobbed. Do what? I won't be able to tell her anything. You damn well should. All of you must. I've given you enough information to start figuring things out, but not enough to resist it. Remain calm until you know more. They're nervous now because of what I did to Katie. They may become defensive. Wait and act smart. We finished our beer. Nobody wanted to talk anymore. I went back to our apartment to take a shower. Cecil stayed outside and drank more beer. All the girls were at his house, and he didn't want to go home. Sometime later, I saw him get into his car and drive away. I don't know where Raymond and Gary went. After my shower, I fell asleep on the couch. It was about 8 in the evening when I heard a frantic knock on the door. Woke up, I stumbled to answer. John, put on your shoes. We have to take Amy to the hospital. Julie stood in the doorway, holding Amy close. Amy held the bloody towel to the left side of her face. What the hell happened? Gary and Amy were arguing. Gary hit Amy. She fell and hit her head on the corner of the coffee table. He was out the door before he realized she was hurt. How bad is it? Do you need a hospital? By this time, I was helping Julie get Amy to my car. When she hit the corner of the table, her eye popped out of its socket. It just hangs there. We are afraid to try to put it back and think that it is better to see a doctor. A good choice. It was only a 10-minute drive to the hospital. For the first 5 minutes, everything was quiet. It's all your damn fault, John. If you had kept your mouth shut, this would never have happened. To rant the way you did was mean and cruel. I don't know what you said to the guys after we left, but it didn't seem to make the situation any better. We haven't seen Cecil or Raymond all day, and I'm pretty sure Amy regrets meeting Gary. Sorry, that's how you look at it, Julie. I'm not the one who caused the problem. I just expressed it openly. If you want to blame someone, put it on you, the women who cheated on their husbands. Go to hell, bastard. Luckily, we arrived at the entrance to the emergency department before the conversation became even more heated. I parked the car while Julie helped Amy check in. When I entered the waiting room, Amy had already been taken care of. Julie was busy filling out paperwork. I didn't know what to do, so I just sat there. After finishing her work in the emergency department, Julie called Amy's parents and asked them to come. She then called Marcy and told her the latest news. I tried to look inconspicuous. To be honest, I did feel a little guilty. I should have realized how unstable Gary was. I think in the end, it was my fault. I felt he should know, but I didn't try to provoke him. Everything just went wrong. I noticed Julie was down the hall talking on a payphone. I was wondering why she uses a payphone when she has a great cell phone. About this time, my cell phone rang. "John, this is Gary. I need your help." "Where the hell are you? What have you done, idiot?" "I'm at the police station. I'm preparing to turn myself in and wanted to talk to you first. Amy and I had a fight about her affair, and I freaked out. I went down to the gym and beat up the trainer she was messing with. I hurt him pretty bad, John, and I think I need your help." "It's much worse, Gary. When you hit Amy, she fell and hit her head on the corner of the coffee table. She damaged her eye quite badly. Right now, we are in the hospital. John, I only hit her twice, and it was with an open hand. I didn't hit her with all my might. I left immediately after hitting her so as not to hurt her." "It's too late, Gary. How bad is that guy at the gym?" "Very bad. I called 9.1.1. On the way here. He'll probably be taken to the emergency room too. I'm sorry, John. I'll come as soon as I can, Gary." At that moment, Amy and Raymond's parents arrived. Raymond asked me where Julie was, and I pointed down at the payphones. Julie wasn't there. He looked around for a while and then returned, shrugging. Amy's parents went into the room where they were looking after her. I briefly told Raymond what happened and then went to the police station. He said he would stay here and wait for Julie. As I was leaving, I ran into Marcy. She said she took Katie to her parents' house. The ambulance was bringing in a bloody mess, which I assumed was the famous Tom. It took about 2 hours to settle matters at the police station. They agreed to hold Gary at the station until I could post bail on Monday morning. In addition to beating Tom to a pulp, Gary hit him in the privates pretty hard, and then, for some reason, smashed his right arm with a stand. He couldn't explain why he did it. Raymond was home when I got there. He looked for Julie at the hospital for about an hour, and then went home. She left and took her clothes and personal belongings with her. I told him he could stay the night with me. Things weren't going well. Marcy woke us up the next morning and demanded to know where Cecil was. He was not home. After convincing her that we didn't know anything, Raymond and I went to breakfast. When I returned home, Katie's mother was there. Katie wanted to stay with them for a while, and she came to pick up some of her things. We collected enough for her to survive. At this point, I didn't think Katie would be coming back, so I told my mother-in-law that I would drop off the rest of her things the following week. She said she understood and apologized for the problem. Her voice sounded sincere. I assumed that Katie told her parents what happened. Amy's parents took her home with them. The doctor put her eye back in its socket, but was unable to get it to function properly. The emergency room doctors were confident that with some professional attention, this could be corrected. The next morning, I released Gary on bail. He told me in detail what happened. It was pretty dry. He talked to Amy. She denied everything. He hit her with an open palm and she admitted to cheating and told him who it was. She tried to stop him as he walked out the door and he pushed her. She hit her head, but Gary found out about it later. The gym was open late Saturday night and Gary had no trouble finding Tom. He made the mistake of smirking at Gary and implying that it was Gary's fault for not taking care of the housework. The muscle Hulk was no match for the gentle giant, and Gary beat the crap out of him. He knew why he kicked him in the groin, but he couldn't explain why it broke his hand. On the way to the police station, Gary called 911 to get help for Tom. When we got to the apartment, Amy's parents were waiting to pick up her things. Gary and I helped load everything up. Amy's mother was furious and did not want to look at Gary or talk to him. He tried in vain to apologize to her. Amy's father, however, took Gary aside and consoled him a little. He seemed to understand what motivated him to do what he did. Amy had no intention of returning and was planning to file for divorce. This didn't seem to help Gary's depression. I haven't seen Cecil for a couple of days. When I called his workplace, I was told that he had taken a week's sick leave. I also didn't see Marcy and assumed she had gone to work as usual. When I finally started work, I explained that I would be busy with personal issues for the next few days and asked someone on staff to take over my current workload. The first step was to contact the Burbank Health Club headquarters in Omaha and explain the situation, including the pending lawsuit Gary was about to file. They had 23 clubs in 10 states. They called back an hour later and made an appointment with us the next morning. A little bluff worked here, but I had to try something. Raymond stopped by later that day. Julie used her credit card to buy gas, food, and a motel room on I-95 South. He canceled all credit cards and her cell phone account. Jerry Merchant failed to show up for his job as production manager at the local Winn-Dixie. They were unable to reach him at home. Now I know who Julie called from the hospital payphone. She decided it was easier to just leave rather than face Raymond. I think it was a good move on her part. Soon after this, Cecil appeared. He was very busy. He found out that Marcy was dating a guy she worked with named Frank Marcel. He was married, so Cecil dialed his home phone number. He spoke with Frank's wife and arranged to meet at noon the next day at the mall food court. She insisted on meeting him in a public place. Cecil asked me to go with him to make sure he didn't do anything stupid. Cecil hasn't seen or spoken to Marcy since Saturday. The three of us went to Red Lobster for dinner and asked Gary to meet us there. It was a somber dinner. None of the guys wanted to talk about what happened. Perhaps if we had not discussed this, everything would have gone away on its own. Dreamers. After eating, Gary and Raymond went home, and I don't know where Cecil ended up. When I got home, I called Katie's parents. Katie didn't want to talk to me. I spent the rest of the night packing her things. Tomorrow will be a busy day. Good morning. My name is John Terrell. Let's start. I looked at Kevin and Kyle Burbank and their lawyer, Phil Mertz. Gentlemen, there is no doubt that Gary Wilson caused physical injury to Tom Reichert. What I think is important are mitigating circumstances. What are the circumstances, Mr. Terrell? Phil Mertz appeared to speak on behalf of the brothers, which was a good move. Mr. Reichert had an open affair with Amy Wilson for several months and bragged about it. I didn't have proof of this, but I just tried it. On the night of the attack, Mr. Reichert bragged to Mr. Wilson that he gave Amy sexual satisfaction that she did not receive at home. It appears that he was trying to provoke Mr. Wilson, which turned out to be a mistake on his part. What's next, Mr. Terrell? Gary Wilson will sue Tom Reichert and Burbank Health Clubs for a 7-figure sum. It will be a messy trial and a very public one. I can assure you that many husbands will check their wives' membership. We will not mention hidden video and photo cameras in massage rooms and solariums unless necessary. I made another long shot. I had no idea if there were any cameras there, but I figured they didn't know for sure either. There was silence at the table. It was as if they had heard this story before, and none of it was a surprise. This was new to me, but I'm not into a health club. Can I see you for a few minutes, Mr. Terrell? I nodded to Mr. Mertz and left the room. I'd like to say that the room was bugged and I heard every word they said, but that's not true. A few minutes later, they waved me back. What do you propose as a compromise? Very simple. Drop all charges against my client and transfer Mr. Reichert to another facility out of state, and this will all go away. There was a sigh of relief on the faces of all three. Mr. Mertz simply nodded. We all stood up, shook hands, and that was the end of it. They flew halfway across the country for a 20-minute meeting and seemed happy about it. Gary was very happy when I told him the good news, but Amy did not drop any charges. She filed a civil lawsuit for domestic violence and did not seem to mind having her infidelity become public knowledge. I had to work on it. By the time I got to the mall, Cecil was sitting at a table in the center of the room with a woman who I assumed was Frank Marcel's wife. Standing nearby were two very large men who waved at me. The three of us just stood and watched. Cecil was great at his job. He didn't need me at all. The two guys were Frank's brothers-in-law who were unhappy. Mrs. Marcel and Cecil shook hands and smiled after 20 minutes. Cecil and I had lunch while we were there. I was damn curious, but Cecil didn't volunteer anything, so I didn't ask. That evening, I took Katie's things to her parents' house. She was there when I arrived, gave me a small smile and left the room. I left without speaking to any of them. As time went, Amy refused to drop the charges against Gary, and we ended up going to trial. It was messy, and Amy didn't look too good. In addition to the public humiliation, her appearance did not improve despite eye surgeries. It seemed that this would be an irreversible deformity. This endeared her to the jury, which I could not but agree with. Gary got 3 years, but he didn't seem upset about it. Amy also filed for divorce. Jerry Merchant was charged with stealing checks from the Pensacola Market grocery store where he worked. He was caught with a female accomplice in Mississippi and returned to Florida for trial. Raymond, who passed the detective exam, filed for divorce that week. Bobby Gerhard was transferred to Ford's Toledo sales office and was fired 3 months later. Cecil never moved back in with Marcy. He successfully avoided Marcy for several weeks until he was transferred to a post office on Rota Island, off Guam. He was responsible for all postal activities on Rota and the surrounding islands. Marcy still lived in the condominium. My guess is that Cecil returned to the condo while she was at work and took all of his things. Shortly after Cecil moved in, Marcy had a small but painful problem. 2 men grabbed her as she left work and removed a butterfly tattoo from her thigh with an electric grinder. Of course, they never caught the guys, and Marcy didn't reveal any motive. As I understand it, the wound became infected and caused her great grief. She also lost her job for some reason. I never asked. Last I heard from Marcy, she was on a flight to Guam and never showed up. Since then, nothing has been heard from her. Cecil was recently promoted and is now in charge of postal service on all of the outlying islands around Guam. Raymond moved to Miami and now works as a detective in Miami-Dade. The last time I heard from him, he seemed happy. Julie is in prison somewhere in Florida. Gary began teaching prisoners how to weld while he was incarcerated. It went so well that he was offered a full-time job. A year later, he was released. Gary likes his new job. He is no longer married to Amy. Amy still looks sideways. As for Katie and me, we never got along. I would come to visit her and she would always smile and leave the room. Her parents said she didn't go out anywhere and didn't seem interested in anything else. 6 months later, I filed for an uncontested divorce. I think the guys came out of this whole thing okay. I don't think the Wivs did too well. I don't miss Saturday get-togethers. Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.